Hey folks, Robert Smith, Brick and Mortar Properties. I wanted to share with you the 2022 forms changes. So as you guys have probably seen some emails coming out, that there actually are some changes coming out to the form. So this is going to be a really high level view of what those changes are. I'm going to do some additional videos as well, specifically talking about some of these forms and diving in a little bit more and answering some of those questions or giving you some information that I found out whenever I actually watched the webinar. If you haven't seen the forums change posts, if you go into TN Realtors and you scroll down to recent blog posts, this is the home page, go to recent blog posts. If it's not one of the three up here, it depends on when you're watching this video, but you can click on recent blog post. You can click on this blog itself, and it's actually going to pull you up the YouTube video. The YouTube video was great. The webinar that they did, unfortunately, it is an hour and 42 minutes. I know that a lot of us don't have that much time to be able to spend on a webinar, so hopefully I can save you a little bit of time. Like I said, I'm going to do a really high level view, 30,000 foot view, and then I'm going to dive in and dig into some of these other forms changes that I feel are valuable and necessary. For me, whenever I'm watching a video, if I'm on YouTube especially, I'm going to go to playback speed, and I'm always going to have that at 1.5. 2 is a little too fast. The normal, of course, would take the full hour and 42 minutes. I think this helps be a little time productive, time hack, if you will. You may not be able to listen to me at 1.5 just because I do sort of talk fast trying to get through all the information. But the forms package, I'm going to make sure that I include a link for this video in the video, and then also this forms package. I'll make sure that this is included in here as well. Because what's happened is until these forms actually go into effect, or as we get closer to the date, they're actually not included in our forms package here. So you can see here that you can click on 2021 forms, and we're not seeing what those new forms are, what those edits are. So to dive right into this, one thing I really like about this package, if you guys haven't seen this in years past, one thing that they do is they give you a table of contents. They tell you what all's changed. And then they give you the quick synopsis. They say this is everything that's changed within these agreements. For me personally, I think that this is a little confusing. I like to have contexts to be able to see specifically where those additions and deletions are within that form. And so one great thing about this is not only do they give you the quick edits, they also go into the individual forms themselves, and we'll specifically talk about those forms. First, I do have to say that the red text denotes deletions. Blue text denotes additions. Obviously, once we actually get them into the forms library, we won't be seeing the red and the blue. But you can always revert back to this. This is obviously going to be part of the forms library itself, so that you guys will have a copy of this. So like I said, I'm just going to scroll down to everything that this is breaking down. It's actually going to be in these forms. The 30,000 foot overview of the co-listing agreement. Again, I'm going to do a separate video for this because I feel like there's some need to talk about a couple different items or opportunities that we can use this form for. But this co-listing agreement is in connection with the listing agreement. So this listing agreement, and again, I'm going to make that other video to go into how you could do this or where I see opportunity for it. This is not a referral agreement. This isn't for an agent who's going to give you a client and say, here, my hands are clean. You do whatever you want to with them. So this is two specific firms, two specifically different firms. So it's not even to be used within the agency. So if we've got two agents within the company, same location of the company, I should add, if they're two agents within the same location of the same company, this obviously would not be used. This is if you're actually working with another completely entirely different firm. I could possibly see this being used like for the boutique firms. If you got one boutique firm that's a little smaller and they don't necessarily specialize in a product, I could see this being used. One example would possibly be that a seller has a best friend who's a licensed agent, and they say, I really want to be able to work with this person. However, that agent recognizes, they say, I've only done residential properties, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. I'm not really keen on doing land. I've not done land before. I really want to work with you. However, let me bring in one of my associates, one of my other business partners with this other firm, and they're really good at doing land, so I can still work with you and be responsible to you and answer all your questions. However, they're going to be more specialized. And of course, not necessarily to get into the ethics and everything else, but if we're not able to work for that client and give them the services that we're obligated to give them, that's something we would talk about. So I think that there's obviously a need for this form. There was enough of a need that they typed this up and drafted this for us. But again, it's going to be the co-listing agreement. So you're actually going to fill out, just real quick, you're going to fill out a normal listing agreement. In the special stipulations, we're going to specifically talk about RF 707. So the RF 707 is all the special stipulations clauses that the attorneys for us have actually drafted and typed up. So you're going to fill out the listing agreement. In your special stipulations, you're going to add in that clause that says that seller is allowing us to co-list with a different firm. So you'll specifically put that into the stipulations. And then your disclosures and everything else are going to be exactly what you usually would fill out. So you don't necessarily need two different types of disclosures or even two different disclosures stating the two different agencies. But you do want to make sure that both agencies are listed, like the confirmation of agency specifically. You need to put both listing firms in that confirmation of agency so that you guys have that. So again, this is in addition to, not in lieu of, that listing agreement. So again, watch that video that I will be adding shortly for this, so you guys will have that. This is huge. I think that this is going to be something I'm going to have to do another video on as well. So I'm going to call this the appraisal gap addendum, because that's literally what it is. We've had so many issues, and of course this is coming across my desk. I've personally done it several times before. The whole reason for these forms changes is to make sure that we're all doing things the same way. And it also alleviates a lot of the pressures on us to be able to have something in our special stipulations or in our addendums. No longer do we have to pay an attorney to draft something up for us, or we don't have to rely on our buyers to pen and ink change a form and hope that they cover all the necessary steps and all the necessary things that we need covered. So the minimum appraised value contingency addendum is actually covering a lot of things for us. So it's a great form. Line number 9 specifically, just to hit on this real quick, this here is going to be the value that you want the property to appraise for. So the appraised value will not be the purchase price of that property. And so again, this is specifically stating, if there's a difference, my buyer is willing to pay that difference to be able to make that up. And so you've got that on here. Of course, it talks about waiving the contingencies and such. I really, really like this form for these sellers, because obviously we don't know how these buyers are coming up with money to be able to pay whatever that gap is. Sometimes we're seeing gaps of $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 between the appraisal and the actual purchase price. And sometimes we don't know exactly how that buyer is being able to say that this is my money, this is what I'm putting towards it. But I think it's going to help the lenders as well. But that's a whole other topic of that. But they can actually, crazy enough, we've not talked about 80/20s in a while, but they can actually get a lender's commitment letter. So it's possible they could actually even get a loan for whatever that difference is for the appraisal gap. So again, your appraisal price that you want is going to be put here, and then you're saying that we're willing to pay the purchase price. This does not change the purchase price. This just says if this does not meet or exceed whatever this appraised value is, then obviously we can talk about our next steps, whether that's termination or renegotiation or what have you. One thing you will see on here, this is page 1 of 1, they forgot something, which is that signature block. And so they're going to be adding those signature blocks here. So that we've got that. So that'll probably end up making it 2 pages. But like I said, that specifically what I'm calling this is the appraisal gap addendum. But specifically, if you're searching for it, minimum appraised value contingency addendum. So that's what they like naming this thing for that appraisal gap. The sublease listing addendum. So this is going to be a commercial form that we've got here. So these were obviously residential forms. This is going to be a sublease listing addendum. If you're familiar with commercial properties, if you've ever done any kind of leasing, one thing that you're probably familiar with is that more often than not, a lease with a tenant is going to allow them to sublease that. So what this addendum does, because it's obviously something that we've done several times in the past, is we're working with that tenant to be able to occupy that space with a new tenant who has the paperwork, who is responsible for XYZ. This is actually covering that now. So this gives us a little bit of clarification and helps us out whenever we're talking to our landlord or tenant, in this case, who's subleasing it, and then the prospective tenant, whoever we're trying to put into that property. So one great thing about this is it actually does request that we get a copy of the original lease. In that original lease, that's going to give the authorization, say if we can or cannot work with this tenant to be able to sublease that property. And of course, we go over what that is. So read this if you're doing any kind of subleasing. I think that this is really going to clear up a lot of the confusion and take out a lot of those special stipulations that we were having to put in here for as well. So it goes into who's responsible for what, renewals, expirations, everything else. So as you can see, tenant will sign it, and then of course the broker will sign that as well. So you have the exclusive right to sell listing agreement. So this one specifically is designated agency. You'll also see the seller's agency in the next form. So what they've changed here, instead of all window treatments, they've crossed out a couple things. So the red obviously stands out pretty well, so you can see that they've changed that. And I believe that was one of the only changes that they've actually put in here. And again, that's why I like that red. It really stands out. So again, the last document was a designated agency. Now you've got the same exact form being seller agency form as opposed to designated. So they've actually put that information in here as well. Instead of all window treatments, you can see what they've crossed out and added in here. And of course, I'm not telling you how to fill out paperwork, but one thing that they don't talk about, and I'm sort of surprised actually, because we've had so many issues with it, is the equipment. So, well, when you're talking video cameras, when you're talking about Nest thermostats or Nest cameras, that's still not something that's been added here. I think that's really open to interpretation. If you are listing a property, specifically talk to your seller about what they're leaving, what they're not leaving. When you're working with the buyer, and again, I'm not telling you how to fill out anything, but if you've got a buyer who says they have to have that Nest camera, it better be in the paperwork somewhere, because it may not possibly be included here. I don't feel it's included here, so I always actually add that. So again, we won't belabor that point, but that's the only change really for that document there that went into that. So you'll see that both for the seller agency and designated agency. Again, you got designated agency, and then you got buyer's agency for the exclusive buyer representation agreement. So now this change here actually came from issues with the VA allowing the buyer of the property to pay the commission to the buyer's agent. There are several things that the VA does not allow the buyer to pay for, and our commissions is actually one of them. So we are stating that we understand that we are waiving their obligation to pay us. More than likely, you're going to have something in the MLS that says that we will receive compensation from the sellers. That's obviously not always the case, especially when it comes to for sale by owners. If you don't have a written agreement with that seller of that property and you have a VA buyer, or if they have to change over their financing to VA, if you're not getting compensation, that is not something that you can get paid for here. Of course, you can't take payment outside of closing. It has to be all legit. It has to be all up front. It has to be all disclosed to all the parties, and so it needs to be on that settlement statement. If you're taking payment not being on the settlement statement, again, not practicing law here, but that is mortgage fraud if you are getting paid outside of the closing, and it's not disclosed to everybody. So be very careful with that. So like I said, that was obviously a needed change, just so that we're all on the same page, we understand. And of course, we can also explain that now to our buyers whenever we're filling this out, to say, hey, this is what this means, to go from there. I think there was one more change within this document. I want to say it was specifically where the designated agent was. So again, that was the designated agency. Now this is the buyer's agency form here. So again, it's just added that VA guideline clause in there, saying that due to VA guidelines, that is not allowable to pay our commissions out of there. So that's that change. Just scanning through. Okay, so now we've got what used to be the listing listing/agency mutual release agreement. Now it says listing/buyer's representation mutual release agreement. So as you can see here, everything that's in red, they've actually marked out, crossed out, changed a few things. So instead of agency, they say listing. They do specifically cover us here. So if you have them sign an exclusive right to represent, if you're terminating that exclusive right to represent and you don't have a clause in there or anywhere stating that you can still get paid if they were to purchase that property, then you're out of luck. So what this does here is, even though you're terminating that buyer's representation or the listing representation, you're still able to possibly get paid due to this clause. So again, read this. If you have questions, talk to your attorney. That's exactly what that's going into there, to make sure that we didn't show them something, and the day that they terminate our agreement, they turn around and purchase it tomorrow from the homeowner, trying to get a better deal because now they're not paying commissions and such. Disclaimer notice, you've got a couple changes in here, just one actually. So instead of signing a contract, you can see submitting an offer on a property. And again, they've made a lot of these changes just to clear up some confusion, to make sure we're all on the same page and doing things the right way. Purchase sale agreement, you've got that here. So again, all window treatments, they've marked out treatments. Put that in there just like what we saw before in the listing agreement. So they've made that change there. They've checked off some of these, so unselected items will not be part of the agreement. They removed that, and so now you can put that. Funny enough, they were talking about today that there can be two types of loans on the property as well, possibly. I think I've seen that maybe with USDA and then THDA whenever they were doing the buyer's top up. They were doing like the $8,000. It was technically two separate setups, and so that's where that comes into play. Again, cleaning up some of these verbiages. If it specifically is capitalized, and that's meaning this specific agreement. Of course, if it's seller, it means this specific seller. Semantics really is what this is, and so they're just cleaning some of that stuff up from what they had in there before, just making sure there was no confusion. Super happy to see this in here. This is obviously something that is in the VA FHA addendum. I say obviously, it is in there. It's obvious to me. But this is something that's in now the purchase and sale agreement. What I really like about this is that no matter what type of loan you're getting, they are now specifically talking about public water or the public sewer systems. I'm not going to read this to you. Definitely read into that and see what that means for both your sellers and your buyers. But I really think that this is a needed clause. This is a great clause that I'm super happy to see, just because there's been some issues with that as well. So of course, because they've added that clause in there, now they've changed out some of the numbers, so you'll be able to see that as you scroll down through here. They've got in here too, so it was either we're going to do an inspection, and now we reserve the right to be able to do repair replacement addendum, or we completely waive all inspections. Obviously, we've had some issues with this. This is one big thing that we've actually had several questions about. I think this really helps the seller to put them at ease, and then of course it allows the buyers to still be able to do their inspections. However, they're waiving the right to request anything to be repaired or replaced. So it's basically still take it or leave it, but now they have the opportunity to be able to do the inspections as they see fit within that certain timeline, whatever that established time frame is. They've got that there. So instead of possibly writing up an offer, and of course we've seen this several times, somebody writes up an offer on the property, they're willing to pay more than anybody else, but then they go in later on and they try and negotiate repairs, or else they sort of try to hold the seller's feet to the fire to say, well, I'll back out if you don't do X, Y, Z, when that was their intentions to begin with. Now that alleviates a lot of that distrust and issues that we've had in the past. And so I think that's a needed add there as well. So again, changing some of those numbers, as you can see, semantics. Instead of a contract, they now call it agreement. So they're good to go there. And that's the changes in that. Mutual release. So this was one question that they had. So any requested, sometimes they don't know what to request. Now it shows all required. So if you're terminating a purchase and sale agreement and looking for that release, all the required documentation supporting your buyer's right to terminate is now going to be something that you have to legally give to that seller. Another change they've put on here is appraisal contingencies. Obviously, that was not in here before. Again, due to the climate and everything that's going on, we've got appraisal contingencies that we've got there. So you can still mark other, put that stuff in there. More than likely, you're going to have a notification agreement that says these are all the issues and the reasons why. And then you're going to add in, after that notification, you're going to do the mutual release. And I won't get off in the weeds on this here. My preference is to see this every single time. However, it's not to say that this is legally obligated every single time, because there are certain things in that notification that automatically null and voids that contract. But this way, we've got a leg to stand on to say who actually gets whatever they're getting, how it's going to be returned, what have you. So I really like to see this form anytime we have any kind of termination. Just clears things up, makes sure that we're all doing things legally and the right way. And of course, everybody signs it, and that's the nice thing about this as opposed to notification. Notification doesn't have the two parties on here, whereas this one does. But again, I'm not going to tell you how to fill out documents. Amendment to the listing agreement. You can see here, obviously, we have a marketing of the property commencement date on the actual listing agreement. So now we've got, if we need to change that, as opposed to having to put something else in here, a pen and ink change. So obviously, if you've got a property that's supposed to be marketed on a certain date and they need to bump that up, bump that back, what have you, you now have an amendment to be able to change that here as well. Backup agreement contingency addendum. As you can see here, they've crossed out all time periods specified, and they actually went into this, and so they equated this out to a baby being born. So there can be a 0 day in the paperwork. So a 0 day is the day that you guys sign the offer and bond it, being able to turn that into a contract. So that is day 0. Day 1 would be the day after you bonded. So that would be tomorrow. If we sign something, bound it today, tomorrow would be day 1. And so that's what you've got with that. And so here specifically, they're stating that exact thing. So when that starting time actually begins. VA FHA loan addendum, like I said before, it specifically says now, see that section in the purchase and sale agreement. Just to clear up some of this, I've seen these very often filled out incorrectly, or somebody didn't know what to put, who to put, when to put. So I like seeing this taken out of there, cleared up. Of course, we don't like to see any zeros in the paperwork, but shall be deemed to be 0 if left blank. We do have that because I know that a lot of people weren't comfortable putting a 0 in there or leaving it completely blank. So now we're authorized to do that as per the attorneys. Investment property addendum. We've got this here. Again, this is a very valuable ad because what we've seen in the past is that we didn't have this covered. So we would have to go into special stipulations and say within all these clauses that are 18 pages long, this is what we want to be able to see. So I equate this out when you're talking about the commercial paperwork. You've got the request for due diligence documents and everything else. I feel like this is probably along those same lines. I've actually used several of those clauses in that. And again, not telling you how to fill out paperwork, but if you go to the due diligence documents in the commercial agreements for the exhibit, I believe it's Exhibit C, that's actually got a lot of verbiage that I put into my residential contracts if I'm typing them up, and of course, whatever the buyer wants us to do, it's at their own accord, but we do have those certain clauses that we can add in to make sure that they're covered. And so that's exactly what this is. And saying for the short-term rentals, because obviously this is a huge need now. We've seen a lot more of these in the past year than what we did in several years past. It's just saying that they need the documents as far as who's moving in, what the occupancy rate was, what the rental rates were, fees and taxes and everything else. Again, this to me is just part of the due diligence documents that you would normally see on the investment property side anyways. Notification. Again, we talked about notification shortly. They've changed here. So if it's a backup agreement, they've actually added this block here. So this is notifying the backup buyer that they are now in primary position. So that basically means that they've accepted that and they're going to move forward as the contract to be able to close on, as opposed to them now being the backup. Additional contract language, again, Form 707 that I mentioned before. If you scroll all the way down to 21, this is the agreement that we're going to put into, or the clause rather, we're going to put into the purchase sale agreement, stating that we actually are going to be doing the co-listing for that property. So this is what you're going to put in the special stipulations. Copy and paste it. Again, this was drafted up by our attorneys at state to make sure that we're protected and covered and good to go. Purchase and sale agreement timeline checklist. As you can see, they just cleaned some things up, semantics, really. Again, instead of contingent, they put, or instead of condition, they put contingent. Almost done here. So commercial exclusive listing agreement. This is not a property management agreement. Apparently there's some confusion about this being a management agreement. We do have a management agreement in the commercial forms if you so choose to use that. And this is obviously just saying that this is for us to be able to sign the lease. This is not part of us being a manager for that property, taking over any kind of management. So they just cleared some things up there with that one. I believe that was the only change that they put in there. Commercial purchase and sale agreement. You had a couple changes in here. So the big change here was as opposed to now putting consummated at the office of, and then you put the title company on this date. Now they've actually got this broken down like they do in the residential forms, which I like this ad because now we can actually have two separate title companies that we can list on here, one for the buyer, one for the seller, as opposed to just putting one on there. And then technically we'd have to change the contract if they each individually wanted to close somewhere else if we didn't already have it in here. So we've got that there. I believe that was the only change. Yep. And so that is the completion of the forms change package. So hopefully I saved you guys about an hour. I'm happy to answer any questions as far as I understand it. Again, I'm not giving legal advice. But I can definitely answer some questions, definitely help you out with this. And like I said, there's some more videos and such coming soon. There shouldn't be necessarily any changes. It's rare to see changes after they've put this out. But if they do ever do a change, they will inform us. Let us know what those changes are. But these should, for the most part, be most everything that we've seen. So definitely look these over. Definitely review these. If you have the opportunity to watch that YouTube video, definitely avail yourself to that. Hopefully this was beneficial. Hopefully it saved you some time. If I can do anything for you, please let me know. Be safe, good luck, and happy selling.